Welcome to the Office of Student Success. Today we have a brief tutorial on resume writing and formatting for business students. As you can see in front of you, we have a sample resume for a student seeking an entry-level position. With your own resume in front of you, we're going to go through each section and modify some common errors we see in resumes. The top section of your resume is called the header. Your header is going to start with your first and last name. It should be bolded and slightly larger than the rest of the words on your resume. You also want to include your address. Just the city and state is sufficient. You don't need to include your street address. You want to include your phone number, that's going to be the easiest way to reach you, and a professional email address. Some candidates also elect to put their LinkedIn profile on this section of the resume. This is a great way for employers to see further into your professional experience and your personal experience. So if you have a LinkedIn profile, we definitely recommend you inserting it here. The next section on this resume is an objective statement. Normally employers are not looking for an objective statement, so what we like to do is we recommend that students replace the objective statement with a summary of qualifications. The summary of qualifications can be written in bullet point form or in paragraph form, and for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to put them in bullet points. Now, anytime that you add a new text to your resume, you want to make sure that it stays uniform. So we're going to change the font size and the font content to make sure that it is the same as the rest of the resume. The first bullet point on your summary of qualifications should summarize your work experience and your school experience to give your employer a background for what you're doing now and what you've done in the past, followed by some bullet points that highlight some of your greatest accomplishments in your previous work experience. This is also the section to highlight any technical skills that you have, if it's MS Office, PowerPoint, and any programming skills that you have, you want to include them in this summary as well. Now we're going to move on to the education section, which, as you notice, education has its own header. And when we get into the education, the first thing we want to do is make sure that we give our degree a name. So in this case, the BS degree in Business Administration, we want to just go ahead and write that all out. So this may vary depending on your degree program, but this one is going to be Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration. And we also want to make sure that we include our major. So a lot of times employers are looking for specific majors in their job descriptions, so you want to ensure that your employer knows what your major is. Another common mistake some students make is not utilizing the white space that's on the right-hand side of the resume. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to move some of this information over to that section to give a to fill up the screen a little bit more. Now, if you notice, I am deleting the start date for when the student started their bachelor's program. The reason for that is that employers are mostly interested in knowing when you're graduating as opposed to when you started the program. So we're just going to cut the date and we're going to paste it on the first line, and we're going to just fill in that right-hand side white space. So that way it gives us just a little bit of a fuller look. We'll go ahead and format that. You also want to include, right underneath the date, we're going to also include a GPA. Now the GPA is only recommended in two cases. The first would be that you are still in school. So if you've graduated over a year ago, you're not going to want to include your GPA. And you also want to include your GPA if it is a good GPA. So we'll go ahead and format that so again it fills up the space. And we want to keep this consistent, so we're not going to bold that either. The last thing we want to touch on for your education is the location. So the University of South Florida, we want to indicate that we attended the Tampa campus because there are multiple campuses, and also if you're applying for a position that is out of state, your employer might not be familiar with where your university is. The next section we're going to go to is employment, and this is one of the most important parts of your resume, so we want to make sure that it looks great. The first place that we're going to visit is the location, the date, and the position that this person has had experience with. So we want to highlight the location. So we're simply going to do that by bolding the University of South Florida where he worked. The second thing we're going to do is we are going to match the date from the education and put it in this white space over here. So we want to make sure that everything is consistent throughout the resume. So we are going to just cut this out of here and put it on the right-hand side. All right. Now, on all of our experiences, we want to make sure that it is consistent throughout the resume. So on his next work experience, we are also going to bold the location. We are going to put the date on the right-hand side as well for this experience. And then make sure we close all of those white spaces. One minor thing to look at also is the tenses of some of your verbs. So if this is our student's current work experience, you'll notice that all of the verbs are in present tense, as it should be. And then if you're looking at any experiences previous to that, all of the verbs are in past tense because the person is no longer doing that job. So just go through and make sure that all of those verb tenses are correct. And then also, if you notice here, we want to make sure that we do not include any punctuation in our job experience descriptions. The reason is that these are not complete sentences and they're just phrases, so we want to make sure we leave out any punctuation on the work experience. Very often, students will have a computer or technical skills section, which is recommended if you are going into a profession that requires a lot of technical skills. In this particular resume, we've already included all of these technical skills in the summary of qualifications here at the top. So it's not necessary to duplicate that experience. So just for this example, we are actually going to delete this computer skills section. This will vary depending on what your area of expertise and study is. In this case, we are going to delete that entire section. The last area that we have to look at is the activities and awards section. This is an optional section depending on your personal experience. In this case, we have a student who was a Student Finance Association events coordinator, and he gives a brief description of what he did in that position. And so this looks like something that will definitely help his resume, so we are going to leave that on his resume. The Dean's List mention is also something that is very desirable and something that shows that he's a good student, so we're going to leave that as well. However, when it comes to this ABC scholarship recipient, this is not necessarily something that will help his resume, so if it doesn't help your resume, we are just going to leave it off. And that concludes all of the sections that we want to cover in this resume. So as you can see, we have a very consistent, very detailed, entry-level resume sample here for you. We would like also to invite you just to visit our office. Our contact information is here at the bottom of the resume. We have our website, email address, phone number, and location, and we would love to visit with you and give you a more personal and in-depth look at your resume and your cover letter.